the technology. So for those of you that are on the call that don't know me, I'm Simon Chaplin. I'm the Managing Director at GreenStones, and I'm here this morning to facilitate the conversation. Obviously, we've got your questions that you've submitted when you registered for the webinar, and Mark and Nicola, who will join us now, both also from GreenStones, will answer the questions basically to the best of our ability. So it's a bit of a moving feast at the moment. There was an announcement last night around some legislation, for example, to help the self-employed. And this morning, it doesn't, nobody seems to know whether it actually passed in the House of Commons or whether it's going to the House of Lords, which is one version of events, or whether it failed and it's not going forward. So we will do our best to answer, and I'm afraid if we don't know the answer, then it will just be a straightforward "I'm sorry, we can't help." Thank you for Tony and Paul for submitting your questions on the chat. I will get to those. The idea this morning is we're going to answer as many questions, as I say, that you put forward, and then I want to show you a quick cash flow forecast or quick Excel spreadsheet or whatever spreadsheet system you use, but a quick Excel spreadsheet that shows you how you can build a quick cash flow forecast to give you a better understanding of where your business is from a money point of view and whether you'll actually need the grants or the loans. And then, as I say, any other questions that come along, we will we'll answer them to the best of our ability. So, Nicola, would you just like to introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are?
Hi everyone, I'm Nicola from GreenStones. I'm a lead advisor, so I deal with a portfolio of customers, helping them day in, day out with any advice that they require, and obviously their accounts, tax, VAT, etc., etc. So I'll be here to answer questions on grants, self-employment, and the employee side wherever I can.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. And Mark, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Sure, Mark Swindell. I run the GreenStones Business Mastermind part of the business. So the consultancy element, I assist with the growth within the company to customers.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. And if we can start, we've got a question that Paul's asked on the Q&A, and also lots of other people have asked about how the employee retention scheme will work. So Paul's question directly is, my daughter has been laid off. Her HR department has contacted her and she'll receive 80% of her wages as per the government scheme, but this will not be available until the end of April. Is that right? And what does she do until then? Well, the what does she do until then bit is we can't really help with, Paul, but is it going to be the end of April? What do you think?
So what I can do a quick recap of the employee retention scheme of what we know, if that's all right, just
Perfect.
to give everyone what we know so far. So the employee retention scheme, let's just go through this. This isn't for all employees. The phrase is, this is for fallowed workers. So a fallowed worker is, if you were to be going into your job, or you are the business owner, and you were to suddenly need to make someone redundant due to lack of resource, lack of cash, lack of work for them to do. Instead of making that person redundant and then having them to find a job, and obviously at the end of it, you to find someone else to do the work, then what happens is you allow them, which means that they cannot do any more work for you. And at this point in time, we expect that to be part-time or full-time. They cannot work for you anymore for the short term. So they would go home and stay safe and remain in their homes as guidance has stated. And what would happen is, instead of you paying them at all, the government will pay 80% of their wages or their salary, up to £2.5 grand per month. So the things that we need to obviously speak through on this is the date. So it's expected to be based on the February payroll run, so February 2020, and it can be backdated to the 1st of March. Now, what the HMRC are having to do to allow this to be claimed is put a portal in place for payroll providers. So if you run your own payroll, or if we do it or someone else does it for you, then it will be claimed through the payroll. But what will happen is that portal is still being set up, and there was news yesterday that the Newcastle HMRC office that were doing it have actually fallen poorly. So obviously that's put a further delay in it, but they're expecting, and the Chancellor is hoping, that by the end of April, so by the month 1 payroll run, it will be in place so the 80% comes up. What do you do in the meantime? We can sort of answer in the respect that obviously every business around the country is going to be aware of this guidance coming in. So if you're, from your daughter's point of view, just on a specific point here, if she can talk to the people that she owes money to and see, so mortgage, rent, etc., just communicate that to them and explain the situation. So from her employer's point of view, they should go for a specific HR consultation or have a letter sent out which explains that she would be furloughed, and from what date an agreement would have to be made between employer and employee. And then what happens from there is she will be, this letter will obviously go to her. That is her proof that she's furloughed and will get the 80%. And therefore it's just waiting for the government system in the meantime. Does that answer the question enough?
It does from my perspective, Nicola.
Okay.
I'm a little bit more pessimistic than what you appear to be around the 30th of April. So when I first read that they was creating a portal in order for this process to happen, I expected them to say that it would be available in 2022 and massively over budget. But they didn't. They said 30th of April, which I find remarkable that they're going to be able to do something as short term as that. And as Nicola says, the system is kind of already falling over. So if I was planning, I wouldn't be planning to have that money by the end of April. I would be worst case scenario planning and trying to work out what I was doing if that money doesn't arrive before the 30th of April. But that's purely a personal opinion based on historical stuff for me and what I'm reading in the media. So, but the official line is the money will be there at the end of April. That's right, Nicola?
Yes, that's the official line, yeah.
Okay. And then another question that comes up very often, Nicola, is what happens if we need to reduce the hours instead? So instead of furloughing, or there's different ways of pronouncing it. I'm into furloughing. But what happens if we just need to reduce somebody's hours? Is the 80% available then?
My understanding is no. So I don't know if you know different, Mark, Simon, but my understanding is that they have to completely stay at home. So there are businesses that are doing pay cuts and reductions to keep staff coming in for now and keep the team coming in to get some of the work done. But in that case, my understanding is they cannot claim the 80% at that point.
Yeah, and that's my understanding of how it's set up as well. And then another one that comes up very often is I want to furlough my team. However, my team want to carry on working. They want to volunteer in order to help my customers, keep the business premises tidy, or whatever it is. If you forget about what's the official line to start with, Nicola?
So the official line is if they're continuing to carry out their duties of their work or come into the office or whatever the equivalent is today, then they cannot be furloughed. So the government is only doing it for those that literally have to sit home and practice self-isolation due to redundancy equivalent.
Yeah, so and that's my understanding of it. So if they're furloughed and they can't do any work at all, even if they volunteer. They're off the is how anybody ever monitors that is an interesting question, and again the guidance on it, but it's obviously there to protect from an anti-avoidance point of view and an abuse point of view, because it'd be very easy for employers to say, right, okay, everybody's going to be furloughed, we're going to carry on. We're going to pay you 80% of your wages, but you carry on working as normal, and the pressure that employers could place on employees and all the other stuff. So that process is playing out. The next question, could they be seconded to somebody else and us claim the 80%? So say, for example, if I have got a health and safety business and we've got no work and somebody else has got lots of work, could we second them to that business and claim the 80%?
That one's a bit of a strange one. Again, my understanding is no. My understanding is literally they have to be sent home and stay home. So if they were to go to work for another business, obviously we've seen Tesco's, NHS, etc. are hiring. And in that case, that would be a different employment. So in terms of furloughing, if you're furloughing your team, your employees, your workers, they should be going home, sitting home, not doing any work.
Excellent. And that's my understanding of it. So do we know how long the furlough period is for?
From the HR point of view, you can choose. So you would put in example letters I've seen, and I'm definitely no HR person, so don't take this as written gospel, but from what I'm seeing, the HR letters are saying that we expect you are allowed from the date X. We expect you to be allowed for, say, 6 weeks, 12 weeks. However, we will readdress this situation at that point in time and make a decision at that point whether we continue to allow or whether we then cease the allow and you come back to normal employment.
Brilliant, thank you. If we furlough our staff, you say we cannot do any work for us. What if they obtain employment elsewhere during this period?
So on that one, I'm not entirely sure how that works, because it's then in a situation, and we're going to have to wait for clarity on this one, because the situation the government has written is that they will stay home, because it's obviously encouraging people to not go out as well. So at this point in time, our understanding is they must stay home. If they seek a different employment, that is an issue that we will have to wait for clarification on from HMRC.
Yeah, and for me, Mark, that's an employment lawyer conversation rather than an accountancy or a tax conversation, because my understanding is when you furlough somebody, they are still employed by you. So the contract of employment and everything still stays exactly the same. So if they then go and get a job somewhere else, they could be in breach of their employment contract and all the stuff that goes along with that with regards to gross misconduct, and there's a whole world of stuff. So it's important to remember that if you furlough somebody, they are still employed, and they're still employed under the contract of employment. You're not making them redundant. They've got an entitlement to come back and accept that role where basically when you unfurlough them, if that's a verb that I can use. Is that your understanding as well, Nicola?
Sorry, I was coughing, I didn't hear.
It's all right. So when you furlough somebody, they're still employed by you, so they're still under your own terms.
Yeah, definitely. So the whole idea and the whole advantage of furloughing is that it retains your team at the end of it. So you don't have to go on a recruitment hype again. They're not looking for a job. They've got the security that their job will exist again at the end of this when the world returns to normal.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you.
It's also going to be a great question for this afternoon, Simon, as well.
Yeah, so at 12 o'clock today, we've got Daniel Barnett, who is a leading employment law barrister from down in London, who I've known for a long time, who's going to answer lots of these questions. There's already 50 some odd people on that call. Mark, if you want to put that into the chat box, so if people are not on that, they can join.
I'll put the link in now.
Video, that's brilliant. And the other thing is, if you could leave the chat box just for technical problems, that would be great, because I've got 2 places to look for questions. So if you could do the questions in the Q&A and leave the chat box for anything else, that would be great. And then it just saves me looking backwards and forwards. So just continuing on the furloughing, Nicola, can you furlough if your company remains open but with a skeleton staff? So that's another question that comes up quite often.
Yes. So
do you have to furlough everybody?
No, you can choose who you furlough, however we want to say it. So much confusion over the word now. But you can choose who. So obviously no different to a normal redundancy situation. The team, you might have a whole team, but only certain departments that are redundant or certain roles that are redundant. So treat the word furlough as if it's a normal redundancy situation, but instead of them getting a redundancy package, they're getting 80% pay from the government with a job at the end of it secured.
Brilliant, excellent, thank you. Can directors furlough? We'll save that for the end. We'll save that for the end if we've got time, because that's almost an hour conversation in its own right. Can we furlough for 2 weeks, but then bring somebody back if somebody else has to go into isolation?
So again, my understanding of this is furlough is a temporarily redundancy package sort of system going on. So my understanding is, you would put like the letter earlier, you would put in that letter that they are due back, say, in 3 months' time, this situation will be readdressed. However, if employer and employee agree to change the terms of that, so come back earlier, extend it, then there is no reason why you can't bring them back in at that point in time.
Brilliant, excellent, thank you. And then Mark, Craig has asked a question around fire and security engineers and whether or not they're key workers. There's in one of the WhatsApp groups this morning, there was a fantastic list of who key workers are and aren't. If you could find that for me, and again, put that in the chat box so everybody, I can't remember where I see it, but...
I know exactly where it is, because I think I've actually downloaded it myself this morning. So, I'll grab that and I'll post that up.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you. Can we employ? So that's just answered that one. I've decided to let my employee go as from today. Can she get 14 days SSP and then move on to the 80% furlough scheme? Or does she go straight into furlough?
So SSP is for people who are literally poorly, self-isolating, etc., etc. So if you're on SSP, that will be because the NHS has told you to go home and you cannot work, or you've been told to self-isolate, or someone in your house is showing symptoms. So at that point, that's where your 2 weeks SSP comes in. If it is just there isn't the work to do it, then SSP is not available. That's where the Falau system comes in.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll just make sure Mark has said, in the event the portal not being up and running as stated, if we pay our staff whilst they cannot work, can we claim this back from the government later?
So this is a great question, and one that we're waiting on clarification for. So what actually happens with that, the HR side of things, is when the Falau date will start. So you would put in this letter, if you stated, say, 1st of March, that would be the date the 80% would kick in. In terms of what we're doing with the March payrolls, that's where we're waiting for clarification. And from our point of view, HMRC don't even seem to know. So we're hoping for clarification on that in the next day or two, because we obviously want to run the March payrolls, but are we running them at 80 and then paying it and getting that reinstated? Or are we leaving it? And some people are postponing. So there's a lot of contradictory advice. So we've asked HMRC, and as soon as we get a response on that, we will explain. But in terms of, getting it from the government, they will go back to the 1st of March. It's just the mechanics of how that we're working.
How it works. Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you. An interesting question that I've certainly not been asked before, Nicola, but if our team members or staff are key workers, can we still furlough part of the workforce?
So my understanding is that key workers should continue to do their job. If it's for the reason that there's not enough work, then, and I'm thinking aloud here because also I've not been asked that, I would assume from the legislation I have read that they would be okay to be allowed. It's probably a question for a HR or an employment legal advisor, but my thought process being the way that it says allowed, it is for anybody who cannot carry out their work or should be made redundant due to the coronavirus situation. So if you haven't got the work because of the coronavirus situation, then I don't see that that's a problem, but I'm more than happy to provide you with some details of HR or employment advisors if that can be clarified for you.
Yeah, my gut reaction is, as a business owner, I haven't seen anything anywhere where the government are forcing me to retain a key worker. So, for example, people processing payroll at GreenStones are classified as key workers because obviously if people don't get paid, then they stop working and the country grinds to a halt. So, but I've not seen any legislation that said, or any guidance or anything that says that I couldn't furlough a payroll person. So I think you can do as you like. It's as the small business owner, if you need to furlough a key worker, then that's entirely up to you. I then got Michelle. I haven't seen any specific guidance around charities at all. Everything that I've seen is around business owners, limited company, self-employed, and employees. Mark, Nicola, have you seen anything specific around charities?
No, unfortunately not. It's just related. It's treating all businesses as a whole, so they seem to be referencing charities within it. But obviously, charities have their own sort of specialised requirements that don't seem to be being addressed right now.
The only ones I've seen, I think, was Michelle and somebody else on the WhatsApp group were discussing. Yeah. That's really all I've seen. It's probably a tough time, but it's that's all there's been so far.
Brilliant, excellent, thank you. Jade's asked, how long will the government pay the 80% for? Is it limited to 3 months, or will they pay it for 6 to 12 months if required, Nicola?
The current scheme that the government have set out is for the first 12 weeks, as that's what they're working to as their current sort of forecast for all this situation. They have said that if required, they will look to extend it, as they're obviously continually looking into this situation. Brilliant,
excellent, thank you. And then the next question, and this is an interesting one because again, I've seen conflicting advice on this. Any idea if it covers employers' NIC and the pension contributions, or is it just the gross salary?
So my understanding is that and again, waiting for clarification here, my understanding is that it is the 2,500 is based on the gross salary, and then PAYE, national insurance, anything in excess is still expected to be paid, but put on a time to pay arrangement. So paid back at a later point in time. It's also worth noting that you have to apply for that time to pay as well. You can't just go for it. Simon gone mute. Should we carry on? Simon, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back now. Yeah, did you answer that question about the NIC?
I think so. Mark, did I answer it? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
It was just Simon that went.
Yeah.
And again.
Should we carry on with the Q&A?
Yeah, I don't know where he's got to. Hang on a sec.
Yeah, I can see them. So,
what should we be doing about our property rents due, please?
So for property rents due, if this is business or personal, either way, it's worth communicating with the landlord or if it's mortgage as well, with the bank. So if you've got rents due that you need to pay, phone up your landlord, phone up your mortgage provider and have that conversation with them. So you can ensure that you're obviously, if you can't pay that, you're making them aware of that and seeing if you can get some sort of holiday off the back of that.
Back with you, Simon. I think we were just going through some of the questions. So
brilliant. The question and answer box that I've got is now blank.
Okay. So we've also got, can we pay an amount to employees as essentially an employee loan and then delay the payroll until we have clarification? That's a good question. So employee loans are governed by their own set of legislation. Again, we're waiting for clarification on that, because if you pay an employee loan, obviously there's the point that they pay it back to you at some point. So I guess you're saying that you do that, get the loan paid back when the 80% kicks in. I personally, Simon, have you seen anything on that? I personally haven't seen anything on that.
What was the question? Sorry.
If they were to loan to the employee and then get it back at a later date when the 80% kicks in.
I haven't seen anything of that, and that's the first time I've heard that idea.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, my gut reaction is that I can't see a problem with that if the money's available, because it would be no different to a normal employee loan.
No.
Yeah, mentally I'm just processing how the employee would think about that. Because the team member would be getting a loan as opposed to getting salary, and therefore that implies that it's got to be paid back. And then if the government don't follow through with what they're promising for whatever reason, it then becomes the employee that's at risk rather than the employer. So there's some psychology and whatnot behind that, but yeah, but I don't see any reason why you can't do it legally. I'm just questioning how that works from a...
Is that a question, Daniel, or later? Is that a question
I could ask Daniel, yeah.
He's specialised in that, isn't he?
Yeah.
Can come back on that one.
Just really quickly, one of the questions I'm a bit confused about that people have asked me is that whose responsibility is it for paying? And it seems a really basic question, but I see it a lot on WhatsApp, Facebook groups. They just don't understand who...
Paying who, sorry, the employees?
Yeah, who's responsible for paying this 80% to the employees?
Well, at this point in time, it should be the employer. So it should be the employer anyway, because the employer would have to organise for their payroll provider. So company A director would, if we're running their payroll, would say to us, these are the people I'm allowing. So then we might run a normal payroll for some of the team, and the rest of the team would be allowed. And at that point, as a payroll provider, we would provide the service of putting that up on the HMRC portal to get it. But that's still the employer's responsibility to tell us that they've made that agreement with the team.
But they're still paying the payroll, whether it's allowed or...
Yeah, they're doing it. A bit like maternity pay, I guess. They're doing it and the funding is coming from a different source.
So the funding will eventually go to the company and then...
Well, we're waiting on... We're just waiting on the mechanics of whether the 80% will go to the company, whether it will go to the actual employee straight into the bank. Now, my guess from what I've read, it will go to the company, because there's a lot less admin for HMRC to sort out there than if they take each employee's bank details. But that's yet been clarified. So obviously they're working on that as they're
Yeah.
developing.
But in the meantime, that's the process is that it goes from the company, and then hopefully the company will get the money back at the end of
We
the
believe
period,
so, yeah.
and then they'll carry on doing that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's how we believe it to be.
Brilliant. I've got no questions in the Q&A box at the moment. So I know there was one there from Tony that
We've got 3 left, I think.
Okay.
We've done the Tony one. So the employee loan one we've just done. Not a question, but referencing us, but at the same time not making us eligible, but sending us. I don't, Mark, do you understand that question? I'll just do Vivian's whilst Mark reads that one. Can directors allow? So I'm happy to quickly touch on this one. Happy with that. So bit of a weird one. We've not had confirmation, and in the world of accounts and tax and advisory, there is a lot of contradictory information. So if you're in the WhatsApp group, you might have seen that someone's had a chat with accountants elsewhere has had a chat with HMRC, and they've said they should be counted for the 80% wages. However, I've also been speaking to an advisory panel who have said that if a director allows themselves, then how do they unallow themselves without doing the role of director, at which point they're contradicting the terms that the government have laid out. So we are waiting for clarification on this, and the government has announced this morning that they have been, obviously there's been the rumours of the working on self-employment, but the briefing this afternoon is expected to be about self-employed, and we don't know if that will cover directors also. So hopefully we will get an answer in that time. At this point in time, it's hard to say yes or no, but my personal view is it's more likely to be a no based on the fact of a directorship. But if you're seen as an employee, so if you're a director and have the responsibility to run your company, that's one role. But if you're the employee, if you're a director who's an employee and carrying out the job, if you stay home, then you might get it, but it's very up in the air, and until we get specific clarity, it's hard to answer that specifically.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I don't think I've seen a debate, something debated as hotly as that recently. The other thing that people listening need to be aware of is that most directors, even if they can be allowed, they're only paid at the moment being paid £8,642 a year. Nicola, is that the right number? It's about £8,000 anyway.
Yeah, 719 a month or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, 719. Yeah, because they'll be paid low salary, basically the personal allowance, and then high dividends, because that's the most tax efficient way in order for them to receive the salary. So even if they get 80% of their salary, it will be 80% of the personal allowance, basically the 719 or the 791, as opposed to what they've been taking of the salary plus the dividends. Is that right, Nicola?
Yeah, that's correct.
Brilliant. Vivian, I'm worried about paying 80% to members of staff with reduced revenue coming in and then not getting it back. How can we get definite clarification our business is eligible?
So employee retention scheme is open to all UK businesses, and that is stated in legislation by the government.
Yeah, so it's available to everybody. Is basically the answer to that. If we furlough somebody a week into the payroll month, do we get 80% on the remaining time? So is it prorated, Nicola, or is it? So if
partway through the month, my understanding is that they would get no different to redundancy. They would get their pay up to what they've done. So say it was up to the 20th of March, they would get the 2/3 of the month paid in full, and then the 80% would start on what their weekly, daily wages, etc., would be from there.
Brilliant, thank you. Let me just do that. Sorry. And then can we increase the director's salary to cover the dividend payments? That's another question that's coming up quite a bit.
We've seen that quite a lot. There's a few stances on this. The first one is it's expected that the employee retention scheme will be based on the February payroll run. So whatever was paid in February. There's also sort of the grounds of the dividends are there, and the tax break that's been there for directors is a different type of remuneration to a salary. So there's sort of an ethical point on that, I guess. Is that fair to say, Simon?
Very much so, yeah.
So from our point of view, we don't believe it would work anyway, because I think it's going to be based from February. But from our point of view, obviously it's not something we would be looking to facilitate.
No. And then in addition to that, you've also got, if you increase salaries, you've then got tax and national insurance implications, and employers' national insurance, and employees' national insurance, and then pension contributions, minimum wage legislation might kick. There's a whole host of stuff that kicks in off the back of that. And the simple answer is, until we see actually how it's going to work, I wouldn't do anything in haste, and I certainly wouldn't be going back. And I mean, some people are talking about reprocessing February's payroll in order to increase their wages in order to qualify, and that's not something that I would condone, recommend, go anywhere near, purely because basically, if you reprocess it, you then have to submit a different file to the revenue, and it will stick out like a sore thumb. There's all sorts of the ethics and the morals and the legal and the fraud side of it is an absolute minefield at the moment. And I personally, and as a business, as an accountancy practice, don't want to go there. So is that your sort of take on it, Nicola?
Yeah, I personally, I've seen some people who I think shouldn't be saying they're going to rerun their February payroll, who I think are meant to come from a sort of background that shouldn't be condoning that at all. But yeah, I'm not going to say that that's the right thing to do at all.
No, it's definitely not for me. So another question, new employees in March, not covered if they're based on the February run?
Again, my understanding, yes. So I've had that question a few times now. My understanding is, and we are waiting for clarification, so whether there'll be anything in writing about this, because obviously it's easy for the government to state something and then not think about each independent little detail, and as they write the legislation they start going through those anomalies. But my understanding is it will be based on the February payroll run, so March would be slightly different.
Okay, and then what about overtime paid in February? Does that count towards the 80% in March? Again,
waiting for clarification of that. So we're expecting it to be on basic pay, but as you might have seen for different roles, like commission, overtime, all of those things can make up a large proportion of some people's earnings. So again, just waiting for clarification on that one.
Excellent, thank you. So let's just move, if we can, just move away, because I'm conscious of the time. If we could move away from furloughing, so I'm just sorting that out so that disappears. Tony, just very quickly on your any news on the self-employment, the simple answer to that is kind of, and I say that's a simple answer. It feels simple in the big scheme of things at the moment. Basically, there was some legislation that was issued last night on the parliamentary website, and it stated that the self-employed were going to get exactly the same as what employees do, i.e. 80% of their monthly income based on their last 3 years worth of accounts. Have I got that correct? I've got that bit correct, Nicola?
Yeah.
Yeah. However, it then quickly was shared that legislation failed in Parliament and it didn't get voted through. At that point, I went to bed. I then woke up this morning and I've been told by one barrister that it was represented, the vote was successful, and it's now on the way to the House of Lords. But another barrister has shared with somebody else that I know that it failed and it's not gone through to the House of Lords. However, what we do categorically know is that Boris is standing up this afternoon at 5 o'clock in order to share an update on the self-employed, because that's Boris's, I believe that's Boris's words.
Yeah, I've read that too.
Yeah, but what that update is, we've got no idea on, but I would imagine, if I went with my gut, I would imagine that it will be based on what that legislation was that did or didn't go through Parliament last night. Is that right, Nicola?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Brilliant. Partway through, so so if they joined, another great question. So Nicola, if they joined partway through February, so they've only got 2 weeks worth of February wages, what will the 80% be based on in March?
My understanding is they will look at it on the pro rata basis, because it's 2 weeks out of 4 or whatever it is in February. But again, until the final clarification is through, we cannot confirm for sure, but that's the understanding that is out there at the moment. Brilliant.
Okay, so that's the last question on furloughing. I'm not going to go anywhere near furloughing. We've done 35 minutes on that. And as I say, we've got Daniel coming on at 12 o'clock. who is the leading expert on it at the moment, as far as Daniel can be. So if you've got any more questions on that, then ask. Go on that thing. I've got a couple of things I want to touch base on, the grants that are available, and then I just quickly want to show you how to do a very quick cash flow forecast in order to enable you to understand your position and whether you need the grants and the loans and all the rest of it. So, Nicola, first question. Do we have any update on how the grants to businesses will work? Whereabouts are we in that process?
Okay, so are you happy for me to just do a quick recap in case anyone wasn't on the last webinar? So grants, there's two different types of grants. If your business qualifies for small business rates relief, i.e. it's got a rateable value of under 15 grand, and you've had the letter from your council, local authority that you qualify for small business rates, you will get the 10 grand grant irrespective of your sector. Now that grant will be sent directly from the local authority. So there is one local authority so far I've seen that has started issuing their grants, but that isn't in this area. But I've also seen mixed information that some of the councils aren't quite aware of how they're issuing it. But there shouldn't be an application for it as far as we're aware. It will just be, you're on the list for the rates, you've got the relief, and therefore the grant will be issued to you. Publications I've read have said that should be going in the next 2 weeks. So hopefully that cash will be with you by the beginning to the middle of April from what we're expecting. So that's the 10 grand one. And then just to clarify, for anyone in the hospitality, leisure, retail sectors, if you have business premises with a rateable value of 15 grand up to 51 grand, then you can qualify for the up to 25 grand grant. So again, the local authority will look at it based on your rates, look at it up to the 25 grand and will issue the grant straight to you. So just to clarify, these grants are not repayments of loans. These are cash in the bank for you to keep from the government to get through this situation.
Brilliant. Excellent. So if anybody's got any questions off the back of Nicola's answer, if you could throw those in the chat after I've shown you the cash flow forecast, I'll come back to Nicola on that. Nicola, do we know if if a company gets a charity exemption?
Yeah, I've just seen that one. It's not been said. The only two reliefs I've seen is the rural one and the small business rates. Let me, whilst you do your little cash flow forecast, let me have a little look and see if I can find anything in the legislation.
Brilliant. Thank you. So what you should be able to see on your screen now is an Excel spreadsheet. Oh, it's disappeared off my screen. Wait a minute. If you can still hear me even. There we go. You should be able to see it's gone again. Here we go. You should be able to see an Excel spreadsheet that I've set up this morning, and it's gone again.
We've still got it, Simon. We can still see it.
You've still got it. Yeah, I can't see what I'm pointing my mouse at though. So the screen just keeps going black. But it's there now in front of me. So what you should be able to see is across the top, I've just put in weeks 1 to 30 or weeks 1 to 12, obviously being a 3-month period. And then down the left-hand side, I've put in incomings, and this is cash that you need to be looking at, not invoices issued or received. So incomings from a cash perspective and outgoings. So that's money that you are spending out. And then in this box, it's just a straightforward formula adding up the numbers above. So if you set up a little spreadsheet like that, and then on the left-hand side, you just put in the customer's name or wherever the money is coming in. So customer, you can ABC Limited or whatever, and then the same in the outgoings. So very quickly, you should be able to build up a little spreadsheet that looks a little bit like this with all the customer names at the top and then the outgoings for suppliers A, B, C, and D. You obviously need your wages figure in there, the rates figure, rent if you're still paying it, phone, any loan repayments, VAT payment, etc., etc. So any money coming out goes in at the top, and then any money that's going, any money that's coming in goes at the top, and then any money that's going out goes at the bottom. You can then move on and put in net cash flow income, so inflow or outflow, and that's obviously just the difference between that figure there and this figure here. So that will give you a figure, and then you enter your bank balance, so however much you've got in your bank, and then it's nothing more complicated than equals that one plus that one. And then obviously the closing bank balance at the end of week 1 becomes the opening bank balance at the end of week 2. So And then that figure goes into there, gets copied across, and then we can copy those figures, or those formulas, I should say, all the way across onto week 2. So now what happens is when you post into here, so say for example, you believe you're going to get £1,000 in from customer A on week 1, you will see at the bottom the cash flow balance has gone up, so you've got £11,000 in the bank. Say for example, you think customer B is going to pay you £500 in week 3, you'll see that at that point you've got £11,000 in the bank. I'm not quite sure why that. Oh, it's because I've not copied that formula across. This is me being an accountant working with technology live. It's not normally like this. So you'll see that the bank balance has gone up to 11.5. I'm quite proud of myself, though, to be honest with you, that I spotted the mistake and it didn't have to be ticked and reconciled. Week 2, say for example, you thought you was going to get £400 from customer C. So anyway, you can see how you can build that up, and then in this side you can put in the payments that you're making, and then say for example, at the end of the month, you've got the wages going out, etc., etc. So you can see as you put those numbers in, the bank balance moves at the bottom. So on this basis, if we work to week 4, you would have £6,000 in the bank, and therefore you're still solvent. Now, what you can then do is you can move on and say, right, okay, every 4 weeks, I'm going to pay the wages figure. The VAT, we won't probably pay because of the government scheme. Drawings, I'm going to draw £500 a week. And then, so obviously over the course of building that up, you can see in this scenario, we can't afford, we haven't got the wages in week 12. So at that problem, we've got at that week, we have a problem. Now, what we normally do is once you've got this set up, obviously you can forecast this for probably 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 8 weeks as a maximum if you're on 60-day debtor terms or people pay you within 60 days. You can prepare the spreadsheet up until this point, and what you'll see is that where the problems occur, but it needs, in these times, in my opinion, needs updating at least daily. So each day you can add or take stuff away, or say, for example, customer B rings you up and says, I'm not going to have that £500 in week 3. You can move it to week 4. And then obviously at the bottom, you can see whether they're paying you or not. So this is a sheet that I've filled out and expanded on it in order to give you an idea as to how that works. And that is the simplest, quickest, and for me, most responsive way of doing a cash flow forecast. And in its simplest terms, mine's a little bit more complicated than this, but from a GreenStones perspective, which is of course a business, I am doing exactly that. And then obviously if it's coming up and it's showing you that you're going to need more money in week 10, then subject to where the numbers are, you need to be having a conversation with the bank manager if you need a loan or an overdraft or whatever it is, in order to make sure that you've got the funds available. You could obviously also say, right, okay, I'm going to furlough my team in week 6, and therefore that figure drops to £1,000, and that figure drops to £1,000, being 20% if you want to continue paying your team, or if you're not going to pay them the 20%, then you just knock it out, and that obviously moves the cash balance. So that is very quickly, that's the number one thing that we're doing with customers at the moment, to give them an idea as to where they are, where their position is. And then the second thing is working out what expenditure you've got, both personally and in the business, to what is essential and what is unessential. And obviously you can then start cutting back on the unessential expenditure. So say, for example, supplier D, you don't consider that to be essential, then you can ring them up and say, okay, we don't want to use your service for the time being, knock that figure out and see how that affects the cash flow forecast. That's a really quick demonstration of how that can be set up and work. Nicola has asked, can I email a copy of the spreadsheet and the formula? Yes, Nicola, definitely. We will. I will send that across. If you email me or email my Nicola on Simon@greenstones.co.uk or Nicola@greenstones.co.uk, will gladly send that through. Nicola, that was a quick Nicola. That was a quick demonstration. Is there anything that you would want to add to that, as to things that you're using, or Mark even as things that you're using with the customers that you're talking to?
No, so that's similar to what I've been doing. Obviously, remembering that when you get to week 12, if you keep that going, so when week one's fallen off the front of it, keep week 13, 14 adding on so that you're always showing a 3-month gap, because obviously this is nice at the moment that week 12 continues, but we don't know how long this will go on for. And when we come back to reality, cash flow forecast, honestly, in all honesty, is a good tool to use all the time.
All the time, yeah.
It's a key point at a economic climate like now. It's a key point, but yeah, to continue using that, if you get in the habit of this, carry it on afterwards, because it allows you to see where your cash is going as well.
And
Yeah.
from what I understand as well, that any loans or bank overdrafts and things like that, people are going to want to see some form of forecasting as well, aren't they? So this has a whole host of uses at this current moment.
Very, very much so. The advice around asking for the loans is that you're going to need up-to-date accounts. So if you've got 31st of March 19 accounts, there's an argument that you're going to need something closer than that, but that's probably as far away as you can go. And then they're definitely going to want to see the cash flow projection to prove basically that you're going to continue. So if you type in here bank, and the bank are going to give you, say, £10,000 in week 7, but you're going to run out of money in week 16 on your projections, the bank aren't going to give you the money because you won't be able to survive. So they're definitely going to be looking at that. I have heard, again, though, on the grapevine, that because it's government-backed and the government are very keen to support through loans, that and there's obviously going to be a lot of people applying for this stuff, so the bank credit checking places and whatnot are going to be overloaded, that it will be more relaxed than what it has been in the past. But that could quite easily be a marketing ploy from a bank. So again, I'm going to say I'm very cynical. The best course of action is to be prepared, and if you need it and have got to do it, then you've got it. If you haven't got it, then you've then got to panic, move into doing it, and it will just delay you, even if it's by one or two days.
The other thing, sorry, just to note as well, that the banks are asking how much you need. So obviously a set of money has been assigned, but they're asking how much you need. And as much as you obviously don't want to take too little, but if you take too much, at some point that needs paying off. So by doing this, it allows you to actually know what you're asking for and have confidence in why you need it and what you're using it for. And then even though the bank might be a bit more flexible than previously, from your point of view, you don't want to take out 10 grand extra than you need and then have to pay that back if you're not going to use it. Does that make sense? Simon gone? I think Simon's frozen again. Mark, are you back? Are you unmuted?
Yeah, yes. No, that makes perfect sense. And it's like I was just saying, at least you've got these tools to be able to add and change the figures. Exactly. That's the key.
Okay, so while Simon's frozen, let's just do a few more of the Q&As. Mark, do you want to work through these?
Yeah, of course. So we share an office. This is Linda's. So we share an office premises with our landlord who hasn't registered as a business with the local authority. Is there anything we can do?
So my understanding is, and it's worth talking to your landlord, but my understanding is the grants are going to those who had the business rates correspondence. So if you had correspondence from your local authority stating these are your rates or this is your relief on your rates, they are the people that will get the grant, is my understanding.
Great, thank you. Stevens, I think, is just more of a comment. Simon, if you go to Code Cardless for monthly invoicing, you can see your next 21 days worth of incoming payments. I think it's a great point. There's lots of tools, which I'm sure if you either use GreenStones or somebody else, there's lots of stuff within Xero and all those applications where you can do stuff like that. And that's assuming that people don't cancel the direct debits, I guess. What is the best number to ring HMRC on if we have specific furlough queries, and is it worth it at this time? Will they have the answers?
Being honest, I wouldn't phone them at this point in time. It's hard enough getting through to delay the taxes. So if in terms of allowing, I've spoken to a few people if I've been on the phone on other instances, or if there's ex-HMRC officers who have communications in some of the groups that I'm in, and they don't know as much either until the legislation has been written. Some of it is just speculation and hearsay, so it's better to wait for the actual guidance instead of wasting your time trying to get an answer that might or might not change.
We could argue spend the time doing your cash flow forecast. Awesome, thank you, Craig. Jade, could you please remind us of the requirements the banks are asking for the loans? Nicola did mention it the other day. I mean, I think you covered it. Just a few minutes ago, but
Yeah, sure. Let's just do a quick recap. So in the instances that I've seen, the banks are asking to see, obviously, the cash flow forecast is one that will greatly help because you can prove it. But they were asking for up-to-date financials so that they can see where you're at. So that cash flow forecast will help with going forward. But they also need to see previously where you've been going, what sort of cash you've got in the bank, etc. They also want to know how the situation is affecting you. So being honest, there's not many businesses it's not affecting right now. But if you've got a specific that we've had to close this sector or our sales have fallen 25% in a day or something like that, whatever it is, if you can state facts, and then it's just making sure they basically want to know if they're giving this money out, what you're going to use it for, which is where the cash flow forecast will help, because at the end of the day, they've been given money they can help with, and they just want to obviously ensure that they're giving the right amount to the right businesses at the right time. So cash flow forecast, financials up to date, knowing why you need it, and knowing what the reason is why you've had this downturn suddenly.
I'm just thinking maybe we can put a small checklist together, perhaps post it on the Peterborough business community.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll make a note of that now. I will give you the other question. Bear with me a second.
Okay,
so from Stephen as well, Simon, when can we expect the small business rate relief of £10,000 to come in?
So I think we touched on that one earlier. That is one where hopefully it's coming from the local authorities, and we're hoping that will be within the next 2 weeks is what we're hearing. But again, HMRC spent a lot of their time on the bank loans first because they were accessible to more types of business. So they did the bank loans as their priority. They're now doing the grants. So the local authorities are just seeking confirmation from the government on that.
Okay. What if you have multiple premises? Is from Michelle, and I think this relates to the previous or a couple of questions ago that we asked.
So the rates
rate
and the
relief,
grants. Yeah, so again, it should be, we're waiting for confirmation as to if you've got one business with, say, 5 offices, what do you do with that? We're waiting to see, but we expect that it will be that if you've had the letter, you'll get that grant. Now, the obvious complication here is if there's one business with multiple, what will happen? So until we've got further clarification on that legislation, we cannot confirm that one, I'm afraid.
Feel free to keep asking us, Michelle, and if we haven't put it up in PBC or something, then we'd be delighted to do that. Simon, I've just got one other question on here before I think you'll start seeing them. So this is from Simon. Your cash flow rightly focuses purely on cash flow. We have some cash, but I still feel vulnerable because we have big costs in the period beyond 12 weeks, which won't go away forever. i.e. we should be by next Friday have accrued and saved a full year's corporation tax, albeit not payable for another 10 months, not allowing for setting aside anything not allowing for setting anything aside, corporation tax, VAT, which are the bills that will need to be paid seems dangerous. How would a bank view this?
So HMRC is obviously one of the biggest costs for businesses, so taxes, so corporation tax, VAT, PAYE, CIS. So all of those items, if to pay is easier to get, so you can extend it beyond its normal grounds, but I completely agree, at some point that's going to become payable. So for now, the government's measures are the short to medium term, but there is obviously discussion that the longer term effects, when we come out of this, there will still be payments. Those VAT bills that have been deferred, self-assessment, will still need paying at some point. So for now, we can plan for the now and look towards the future. If you want to get a loan for that at this point in time, I would advise looking at your cash flow and seeing where you're at now. And you can forecast, Simon's done up to 12 weeks, but you can forecast that forward as many weeks as possible. So even if you made that 52 weeks and put the numbers in that you know fall due, and obviously as you get closer to it, populate it properly. But it's worth having that information and knowing that. And also when you speak to a bank for your loan, say, look, I know my tax is delayed, but this is going to become payable in the next 6 months, and therefore that's the other reason I'm applying. So yeah, that's a great point.
Okay. Simon, have you got the questions back? No, he's gone again, isn't he?
Do you know when we were expecting further detail from HMRC? Unfortunately not. And being honest, it isn't really HMRC who are the holding point, I guess. It is the government's legislation has to be written. So the government liaised with the banking sector to get the loans out, and that's point one. But now the government are liaising with the local authorities. So HMRC, as much as we all like to say that they're not always on the ball, are waiting on the government at this point. So they're also sort of waiting as well.
Where have we got him? We're still in there, haven't we?
It is worth saying any update that we get, we will obviously put on Peterborough Business Community and within the WhatsApp group anytime we get an update.
Yeah, if anybody's not in the WhatsApp group, let us know, because I can put the link to. In fact, don't worry, I will put the link in the chat in a few moments.
That'd be good. And then the final thing, Michelle, obviously, we just spoke earlier about the charity exemption. So I looked at it while Simon was doing his cash flow. It does only say small business rates relief and charity relief. And rural relief, sorry. But from the charity relief point of view, if you do have a contact in the local authority, it's worth having that chat with them, because it's not specifically there. And I went on sort of charity commission, but there's no specific comment on it. So it would be worth having the chat and seeing.
Great, thank you. And we've got, I don't know how everybody is for time. If anybody wants to post, I mean, obviously, feel free to go. We have obviously got still some questions from the original sign up. I'm just going to have a quick look, see if I can see some of these. There's one question: how do we access the employee retention scheme? I think you've covered that.
So that'll be through your payroll provider, who will do it on the portal for you.
I'm not sure if Donna is still on, Donna Nolan. She's put on here, what can I claim? If you've got any more specifics, if you are on, Donna, if you can put
Donna's not on
she's
at the moment.
Okay. What have we got? There was one about marketing, I think, here, which I was quite interested in. Yeah, how do we let businesses know we are offering a service to try to negotiate their lease terms? I think this is really the same as any marketing that you've ever done. It needs to carry on. I mean, I think one of the questions that Simon was talking to me about earlier on was he gets asked quite a bit about, is it crass to still be marketing? And I don't think it is at all. I think we need to be looking to get through this and then what we're doing the other side. And I think that's the critical bit, is initial, like Simon and you have said, short term, medium term, long term. But the short term is now. And I think the medium term is also now as well, because we've got to start getting into the point where we are covering what's going on for the future. I'm probably going to be a wrong analogy here, but you've only got to look at what Joe Wicks is doing at the moment. He's doing a wonderful thing helping these kids stay active, but really and truly he's building his reputation in a time where everyone's looking to someone to go to. So he's trying to become he's becoming an influencer, and the more posts that are going on, the more he's building his brand. So why wouldn't everybody else follow suit if they think that's okay?
Just from my point of view on that, so at this point in time with businesses, and I've been doing a lot of one-on-one with customers to look at repurposing their business, because obviously the business was set up with an intention, and in this world that's changing ever so quickly right now, if there's any way that you can think about what you're doing and can rejig it a bit in some way, because people, not that obviously buying and that has changed, the buying trends have changed, but obviously people are still going out to the food shops and they've been making astronomical revenue sales at the moment. So there are people at home with children that now need to be entertained with, like you say, obviously the well-being of people. There's different services and different abilities there that people are looking to work with. If you can, marketing's a bit of a weird term for me as a nerdy accountant, but from the point of view of obviously marketing, all it is do you have a service that can support someone else, or do you have a product that can support someone? And especially during this time, if you can do something that will help someone else, then it's worth doing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst people might not be spending today, I think people are concentrating on what's happening inside their business, which is exactly right. And that's the short term. But in a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, whatever it is, people are going to start looking outside. So they really need to start making sure that when I think of a product or service, the top of mind awareness is there. So your question, Linda, is slightly different in the fact that you want to be able to do something now. I think there's a massive opportunity for you to speak to people, run webinars, maybe something like this. That, you know, your topic can be: are you going to struggle to pay your rent, or, you know, something along those lines, where you're capturing the real question. Which is what we're trying to do here, is capture the real questions. You know, there is a lot of information out there, people telling people what they should be doing, but the reality of what we're trying to achieve is to actually understand what people's fears, frustrations and questions are, and getting them resolved, rather than just throwing information out there that people just don't want at the moment, I think.
Okay, so I've just heard from Simon saying his internet's completely gone down, and obviously we're at our point, so
Yep.
from where we're up to, is there anything else you want to add, Mark? And then we can obviously...
Well, I think there's one, and I think it might be worth just covering very quickly, and then again, I think a checklist on this might be useful to post into the group. There's a couple of questions within the registration are around what help is out there for small business immediately for cash flow issues. And I think if people are still asking it, I think it's relevant to...
So let's go for it. So the point on the cash flow is, the first one, do your cash flow, as Simon's obviously gone through today. But the first point is the business loans are now available. So contact your bank, building society, whoever you're with. So that's the first one. But know the numbers that you need. The next point is your tax. So if you're VAT registered up until June, so the next 3 months, no VAT has to be paid. So if you've got a direct debit, cancel it with HMRC, because obviously we don't want them to take it and you be out of cash. And that will automatically defer and need to be paid by the end of the financial year 2020-2021, so 5th of April 21. If you can't afford to pay your corporation tax or your PAYE, let your accountant know. So as we're sending out our PAYE, we're asking, if you can't afford to pay this, return by email to us saying that you can't afford to pay that tax, and we are speaking to HMRC on your behalf. And likewise, if you're not with us for accountancy or payroll, same principle with your accountants. Let them know that you don't want to pay that at this point in time, and then they can phone HMRC on your behalf. In respect of, obviously, the workers, that point's coming, the grants are coming. So I'm aware, just as much as everyone else, that those points are on hold, but are being promised to come soon.
Okay, we've just had one come in from Stephen, which again is probably one I've seen a couple of times. Do you have to call the HMRC for the VAT deferral?
So VAT is automatic. So VAT will be done automatically up until the end of June. If it's for any previous quarter, or if it's for any other taxes, then HMRC still need to be phoned.
I think that goes with anything, doesn't it? If you any situation that we're going to be cancelling services or not paying or deferring payments, I think it's one of those things. Just to have a conversation with people. I think there's a lot of open people, landlords, and all that kind of stuff, where people are just keeping services going, but perhaps at a reduced rate or a reduced service. Okay, I'll give everybody just another 20 seconds, see if there's any other questions, and then I think we can close off. We will continue to be doing these. We can continue to do these. Nicola's got to go. I think she's got another conversation with a customer. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Nicola.
Okay. Thanks everyone, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks. So that just leaves me. We are hoping to do these very often, as I was just about to say. So keep an eye on the Peterborough Business Community page, and we will post more soon. So have a great day.